Sameach. We have these last weeks been counting the Omer, counting the days since Pesach. But really since Purim, we have been counting these weeks of uncertainty. The essential workers among us have been outside working, while most of us have been inside waiting. We are paused, trying to work if we still have work, balancing our laptops atop unsteady piles of books, and searching for enough quiet in our homes. I have an airplane flying over me, if you can hear that. We're searching for enough quiet in our homes and our hearts to concentrate. Even those of us who are isolating with friends or family, we might feel overwhelmed by their constant presence, however much we adore them, and find ourselves seeking quiet corners. These past 3 months have been a time apart that has imposed on many of us more time alone, more time for self-reflection. We are either physically alone or we are in much smaller bubbles of human presence than usual. As we celebrate the revelation of the Torah, let us remember where it was revealed. It was in the desert wilderness, in the Midbar. We are Bemidbar now. Reb Nachman of Bratslav, an 18th century Hasidic mystic, passed on this teaching in the words of my teacher, Dr. Eitan Fishbane, that to receive the revelation of Torah, a person must first make themselves into a midbar. The most profound opening of the heart takes place in the physical space of darkness and wilderness, the frightening ground of loneliness and alienation. It is in hitbodedut, solitude, that we are able to empty our minds and hearts of society's overwhelming drumbeat. In that place of midbar, we are able to break open the heart in ways we didn't know were possible, to cry out to God from a place of the deepest emotional honesty. In our hitbodedut, in our relative solitude from close physical, social interactions, we can reach for some of this emotional honesty. We can learn about ourselves and think about who we are in this complicated and increasingly confusing world. One of the most moving themes in Megillat Ruth, which we just read from, is how to define identity. Ruth, the Moabite, joins the Jewish people through her marriage to Naomi's son. At that time, marriage was enough to effect conversion. Then during a famine, Naomi's 2 sons die, and she tells her daughters-in-law that they can leave. And as we just read, one does leave, but Ruth stays, saying, "Wherever you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." Ruth chooses her identity. She chooses the Jewish people, or maybe she just chooses Naomi. And we ask, are we defined by the people with whom we choose to build relationships? The book of Ruth thereafter probes even further into questions of identity. When Naomi, whose name means pleasantness, reaches Bethlehem, the women ask her, "Can this be Naomi?" They do not even recognize her. She is so distraught in her mourning. She answers them, "No, do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for God has made my lot very bitter." And we ask, are we defined by our pain, by our losses? When Boaz, a relative of Naomi's husband, encounters Ruth working in the field, he asks, Lemi hana'ara hazot. Whose girl is this? He is intrigued to figure out her identity, and he waits to find out more. He learns just a bit of her story. She's a Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And we ask, are we defined by a blurb of our history? Boaz then tells Ruth essentially, I know about you. I really know about you. He says, Huged, Hugad, li, kol asher asit. I have surely been told of all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth and came to a people you had not known before. Boaz repeats, Huged, Hugad. He was surely told about what she did. And we ask, are we defined by what we do? And maybe even a harder question, are we defined by what others say about what we do? External feedback can bring us many rewards. Boaz blesses Ruth immediately. In the very next verse, he prays, may God reward your deeds. And when Boaz hears about what Boaz hears about Ruth leads to many more blessings. They ultimately marry and have a child, and that child becomes the grandfather of King David, meaning that what Boaz hears about Ruth in the fields becomes part of our traditional messianic genealogy. Returning to the question of our identities, as we continue to reimagine who we are in the solitude of these times, in the separation and space that this pandemic has forced upon us, we ask, who are we? Are we defined by our relationships, by our histories, by our work? And who are we now, with less of however it was that we shone brightest in the world? If it was our work, we might ask ourselves, were we good only because others could see every day that we were good? The isolation of these times can force us to develop a kind of self-respect that we didn't fully have before, because we used to have more ways to receive external validation. And in order to respect ourselves, we first must learn how to truly be ourselves. So instead of fixating on the story that Boaz would hear about us in the fields, maybe today that's our CVs, our social media presence. I don't know what it would be, but I want to challenge us to reframe that question of our own identities. And when we ask ourselves who we are, how will we answer first before we imagine how others will answer? In a classic rabbinic story, when Reb Zusha was on his deathbed, surrounded by his students, he was crying and he could not be comforted. One student asked him, "Why are you crying, Reb Zusha? You were almost as wise as Moshe and as kind as Avraham." Reb Zusha answered, "When I pass from this world and appear before the heavenly tribunal, they won't ask me, why weren't you as wise as Moshe or as kind as Avraham? Rather, they will ask me, Zusha, why weren't you more like Zusha?" So may we all take this time to learn how to be more ourselves, to rely less on external feedback from others, to shore up our self-respect, because we might one day ask ourselves Zusha's question. Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.